Totally distracted you. UFO sightings, you've seen two?
I've seen two over the years, yes. I just caught your program as I was driving up to the woods to have a walk, so I haven't heard it, I'm afraid, but I just heard what the last chap was saying, just the tail end of it. The first one I saw was on a branch line between Chester and Crewe back in the 70s, and it's something you never forget. I mean, this one was in broad daylight, and we were just sort of trundling along there on this little short branch line going down into the big junction of Crewe. And as you come into Crewe, you know, there's a big... It's a junction station, so you stop and you start, and then you stop and you start. And it was on one of these stoppings and startings when we were stopped and looking out onto the fields to the left-hand side where I was sitting, and there was a couple sitting about 4 seats in front of me as well. And all of a sudden, I don't know, I was just gazing around, and I looked at the field off to my left where there was some great big cooling chimneys there. And right in front of the cooling chimneys, right down on the ground, and this is in early July, sunshine, there was this huge orb. And it was just... It was just sitting there, and from side to side, right round the circumference of it, the dome of it, there was a perfect little rainbow.
Really?
It must have been, I sometimes wonder how many feet it would have been if I'd have walked up to it. I suppose it would have been like 4 times my height, and therefore, it being a circle, it would have been 4 times my, you know, out the other side sort of thing. So it was sort of like 30 foot, I guess, ish. And it was just humming.
Humming?
It was humming. It was going sort of... just like that. And it was one of those moments when you get completely taken aback by something. Say you're walking in the woods and suddenly a deer jumps out in front of you.
Yeah.
You're not expecting it. Suddenly there's a crash and boom, bingo, there's a deer or a rabbit. And you kind of go, there's this intake of breath. And for a moment, the brain does not engage. All you're doing is sitting there with your mouth open going, oh...
Yes.
You see, it's only afterwards that you start to think, now, what could that have been? So in the moment, I remember vaguely standing up and walking over and staring closely out the window and being aware of the couple who'd also stood up. And there was dead silence in the carriage because we did not know what to make of this. And it was a kind of a whitish gold color, and it had this perfect mini rainbow right around the circumference of it. And then all of a sudden the train jolted and started to move forwards. And I just watched it, you know, in complete blank. I had a blankness in my head. And I just watched it disappear into the distance. And that was the first one. Now, as to, you know, listening to radios, and I was only early 20s then, so I didn't go and look at newspapers or anything about that one. But the next one that I saw... was when I used to live in France, and I was just driving home late at night with 2 friends, not, you know, believers in this kind of things at all. We were just chatting, and it was November the 5th, I remember that, because we were disappointed that the French didn't have bonfire night. And we were just driving along on the top of this ridge, where it's very agricultural there. It's in Lorraine, where Quiche, Lorraine comes from, actually. And just agricultural land, no lights at night. And we were driving along in this van. I was driving it, and I looked off to the right across the fields, and I said, oh, there's the radio mast. They were visitors, so I was sort of giving them a tour, you know, and I said, oh, and there's the radio mast. And then I put my foot on the brake, and I said, hang on, there isn't a radio mast there. So I turned and I looked again, and I realized that the thing I thought was upright was actually horizontally in the black sky coming along. So I stopped the van, and I just said, hang on a minute to them. And I got out, and I stood on the road, and I said to them, what is that? And they got out too, and there we stood like the 3 wise men on this little tiny French road in the middle of the night, looking up as this thing approached us. And as it got nearer, you could see the shape of it, and it was triangular. It had a huge red light on the front, and then a little white light sort of at, you know, at that 45-degree angle down the sides. And then a couple of white lights at the back. That was the only way you could pick out the shape of it. It was massive. As it came towards us, it was totally silent. This was the unnerving thing about it. completely. And then it went over the top of us, and we were craning our heads back, and all you felt was the air being pushed like some huge whale that just went past in complete and utter silence. And then it went over the top of us, and our heads turned, and we must have stood there for 10 minutes as this whole thing unfolded, went over the top, and then disappeared in the distance to our left. And then we looked at each other, completely unable to get our minds working. And then somebody said, I don't know who it was, what the hell was that? And I just said, I don't know, but wasn't it beautiful?
What an amazing
and then the
tale.
next day it was in all the newspapers.
Oh, it was reported by other people.
It was in all they tracked it down through Holland, it had gone down through Belgium, across France, and then it had, as they put it, disappeared. And then for the next couple of days there were articles and speculations about it, and then the whole thing just died a death, just fizzled out. There was not any more about it. But there is a quick addition to this. Years later, when I was working in a bookshop in Exeter, I picked up a book which was called Great UFO Sightings of the 80s and 90s, and I was leafing through it, and there it was.
Really?
Yeah, the exact date, and they gave the story of how this thing, which was called an unidentified flying object, had been, and respectable people like lawyers and doctors and radio presenters, all vouched for having seen it, yes, and it was triangular and it was huge. I couldn't say how to measure it, but the unnerving thing, if you see a thing like that with such power that's moving with complete silence, you don't ever forget it.
Diana, thank you very much indeed for a brilliant description. And as I say, the whole studios have gone quiet and just listening to you there. Absolutely amazing. And I hope one day there is an explanation.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have gone into it a bit, but that's for another time. But there's plenty of sightings and lots more interest now. I come from Canada originally, and I used to remember sitting, in the garden at night watching all sorts of moving things in the sky. And there was a lady from Peru I met once who was a nanny, and met her in Belgium, and she said, we know about those. She said she comes from the high Andes. She said, we see them all the time.
Yes, well, in Peru, they have the most unexplained thing. They have the big balls there. And these are granite rocks about the size of this studio, which are in perfect line, and no one knows how on earth they were ever placed there without machinery. And
Isn't that interesting?
Oh, these things are massive. But then again, we can wander off in a totally different direction there. Diana, thank you very much for your call.
You're very welcome.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Fascinating lady.